Hello, my dear friends. Take a slow breath and let the noise of today gently fade away. Tonight we are stepping into a world very different from our own. A world without mirrors everywhere, without bright lights, without endless images telling people how they should look. Tonight we will slowly explore what beauty meant in medieval times, when life moved quietly, and appearance was shaped by nature, work, and tradition, rather than fashion or fame. This is not a story of glamour. It is a soft journey into how ordinary people saw beauty when survival mattered more than perfection. Imagine you are living in a medieval village. The air smells of earth and firewood. The ground beneath your feet is uneven, and your hands are shaped by daily work. In this world, beauty is not about standing out. It is about fitting in. It is about looking healthy, capable, and calm. People do not chase beauty. They simply live, and beauty is noticed quietly in everyday life. For women, beauty often meant signs of good health and balance. Clear skin was admired not because of makeup, but because it showed a body free from illness. Soft hands were less common because most women worked daily, yet smoothness was still quietly appreciated when it appeared. Pale skin was often seen as beautiful, not for fashion, but because it suggested a life away from harsh sun and heavy labor. It quietly hinted at comfort and safety. Hair played an important role in medieval beauty. Long hair was admired, especially when it looked clean and well cared for. Hair was often covered in public, not hidden because it was shameful, but protected because it was considered precious. Braids, simple ties, and cloth coverings kept hair neat and practical. Beauty was found in order and cleanliness rather than decoration. Clothing also shaped how beauty was understood. Colors were limited, fabrics were heavy, and clothes were made to last. A well-fitted garment was admired more than an elaborate one. Clean clothes, even simple ones, showed care and stability. Beauty came from looking respectable, not fashionable. There were no fast trends. Change happened slowly, over generations. For men, beauty was tied closely to strength and reliability. A strong body suggested the ability to work, protect, and provide. Scars were common and not always hidden. They told quiet stories of labor or survival. Grooming was simple. A clean face, tidy hair, and a calm expression were enough. Beauty was not about attracting attention. It was about trust. Religion also shaped beauty deeply. Modesty was praised. Pride in appearance was often discouraged. Looking balanced and humble was seen as more beautiful than standing out too much. Beauty was meant to reflect inner order, not desire. This made medieval beauty softer and quieter than modern standards. As the night grows quiet, imagine walking through this medieval world slowly. Faces are natural. Bodies are shaped by life itself. No one compares themselves endlessly. No one chases an impossible image. Beauty exists, but it is gentle, grounded, and deeply human. In the next part, we will slowly explore how beauty differed between rich and poor, how social class shaped appearance, and why luxury itself became a quiet symbol of beauty in medieval life. For now, remain still. Let the quiet deepen. Let rest continue in its own time. In medieval times, beauty was not loud, bold, or meant to stand out in a crowd. Beauty was quiet, controlled, and deeply connected to ideas of balance and order. Imagine walking slowly through a small medieval town where people live close together and everyone notices small details. A beautiful face was one that looked calm and balanced, not exciting or dramatic. Smooth skin was admired, not because it showed youth, but because it suggested a gentle life, free from heavy outdoor labor. Marks from the sun, scars, or rough skin were common, but they were not part of the ideal image people quietly admired. Pale skin was one of the most valued signs of beauty, especially for women. This was not about fashion, but about class and lifestyle. Pale skin suggested that a person stayed indoors, away from the fields and hard labor. It quietly showed that someone belonged to a family that could afford protection from the sun. Women often tried to keep their skin light by staying in shaded places, wearing coverings, or using simple powders made from natural materials. This was done carefully and subtly, never meant to look obvious. Beauty was supposed to appear natural, even when effort was involved. Facial features were expected to be soft and modest. A small mouth, gentle eyes, and a smooth forehead were admired. Strong or sharp features were often seen as harsh or unfeminine. The forehead, in particular, became an important symbol of beauty. A high, smooth forehead was believed to reflect intelligence, calmness, and inner purity. Some women even removed hair from the front of their hairline to make the forehead appear higher. This was painful and time-consuming, but it was done quietly without complaint because beauty was seen as part of personal discipline. Eyebrows were shaped thin or light, sometimes barely visible. Dark, thick brows were not fashionable. The face was meant to look open and calm, not expressive or intense. Blushing cheeks were admired, but only lightly. Too much color suggested excitement or lack of control, which went against medieval ideals of modesty. Beauty was closely tied to self-restraint. A beautiful person was someone who appeared emotionally calm, gentle, and obedient to social rules. Men also had beauty expectations, though they were different. A handsome man was not judged by muscles or boldness, but by cleanliness, posture, and order. A well-kept beard, tidy hair, and a calm expression were signs of respectability. Beauty in men suggested moral strength rather than physical attraction. Looking clean and controlled mattered more than looking powerful. As you imagine these faces around you, notice how quiet and restrained this idea of beauty feels. There is no urge to impress or shock. Everything moves slowly, gently, and within limits. Beauty was not meant to draw attention to the self, but to show harmony with society, faith, and order. As the night grows quieter, let this gentle image settle in your mind. Faces lit by soft candlelight, calm expressions, simple, careful effort. In the next part, we will slowly move into how beauty was shaped by clothing, hair, and the body itself in medieval life. For now, remain still. Let the quiet deepen. Let rest continue in its own time. In medieval times, skin was one of the most important signs of beauty, not because it needed to look perfect, but because it quietly showed health and status. Pale skin was often admired, especially among women of higher classes, because it suggested a life spent indoors, away from heavy farm work and harsh sunlight. This paleness was not about weakness, but about protection and privilege. A lighter complexion suggested that a person belonged to a household where labor was done by others, allowing the body to remain softer and less exposed to the elements. People paid close attention to the condition of the skin. Smoothness mattered, but not in a modern way. Small marks, lines, and natural texture were accepted as part of life. What mattered more was whether the skin looked clean, calm, and free from visible illness. Redness, sores, or swelling could suggest sickness or poor living conditions, which quietly lowered a person's attractiveness. Beauty, in this sense, was closely tied to survival and well-being rather than fashion or trend. Because medicine was limited, skincare relied on simple everyday practices. Washing the face with clean water was common where water was available. Herbal rinses made from plants like chamomile, rosemary, or lavender were sometimes used to calm the skin. Oils and animal fats were applied to protect against cold weather and dryness. These routines were slow and gentle, often done in the quiet parts of the day, becoming part of a calm daily rhythm rather than a strict beauty routine. Health itself was deeply connected to beauty. A person who looked well-fed, rested, and steady was seen as attractive. Bright eyes, calm breathing, and relaxed movement suggested balance in the body. Medieval people believed that inner balance affected outer appearance. If someone ate too much, worked too hard, or experienced strong emotions, it was believed their beauty could suffer. Beauty was not something separate from life. It reflected how life was being lived. Sleep played an important role in appearance. Rest was valued because it allowed the body to recover and maintain its natural order. Tiredness showed easily in the face, and long periods of stress could make a person look older than their years. Quiet evenings, regular rest, and steady routines were seen as supportive of beauty, even if they were not spoken of in those exact terms. As you imagine these slow medieval mornings and evenings, notice how beauty feels calmer and more natural. There is no rush to improve or change the body. Beauty is something that appears gently when life is balanced and steady. As the night grows quiet, let us move slowly toward another part of medieval beauty, where hair, scent, and small details quietly shaped how people were seen. In medieval times, beauty was not something loudly announced or openly discussed. It was something quietly observed in daily life, noticed in small details that reflected health, balance, and social position. Hair played a gentle but important role in how beauty was understood. Long hair was widely admired, especially for women, because it suggested youth, fertility, and good health. Hair was often worn long and kept hidden under veils or coverings in public, not because it was unimportant, but because modesty itself was part of beauty. The idea was not to display beauty openly, but to suggest it softly. Hair color carried meaning as well. Lighter hair was often praised in poems and stories, especially in parts of Europe where fair hair was less common. Blonde or light brown hair was associated with purity and softness. Dark hair was also admired, but often described differently, connected to strength or seriousness rather than delicacy. These ideas were shaped by culture, religion, and local traditions, and they changed slowly over time. Skin was another quiet marker of beauty. Pale skin was highly valued, not because people disliked color, but because pale skin showed that a person did not work long hours outdoors. It suggested a life lived inside, protected from the sun, which often meant higher social status. Farmers and laborers whose skin darkened from daily work were respected for their strength, but were rarely described as beautiful in the same way. Beauty in this sense was closely tied to class and lifestyle, not just appearance. Because of this, many people tried gently to protect their skin. Women avoided direct sunlight when possible. They wore hats, veils, or hoods. Some used simple mixtures made from herbs or natural ingredients to soften the skin. These were not cosmetics in the modern sense, but quiet attempts to care for the body and maintain a certain appearance. Beauty routines were slow, simple, and deeply connected to daily habits rather than special products. Cleanliness also mattered, though medieval ideas of hygiene were different from today. Washing the face and hands regularly was seen as a sign of good upbringing. Clean skin was associated with moral purity as much as physical care. Beauty was not separated from character. A person who appeared clean, calm, and orderly was often seen as more beautiful, regardless of their exact features. As the night grows quieter, imagine a medieval home at dusk. Soft candlelight fills the room. A woman carefully braids her hair before sleep. She washes her face with cool water. These actions are not done to impress anyone. They are quiet rituals of care passed down through generations. Beauty in this world lives in these calm moments, not in mirrors or judgment. In the next part, we will slowly explore how clothing and fabric shaped medieval beauty, and how what people wore spoke quietly about who they were. For now, remain still. Let the quiet deepen. Let rest continue gently. In medieval times, hair was not just hair. It was one of the strongest signs of beauty, status, and even character, especially for women. Long hair was seen as healthy and attractive, but it was rarely shown freely in public. For most women, beautiful hair was something private, shared only at home or with close family. Outside, it was covered with veils, scarves, or simple cloth wraps. This covering did not mean hair was unimportant. In fact, the effort to hide it made it more powerful. Hair became something imagined rather than constantly seen, which quietly added to its value. The color of hair also mattered. Light-colored hair, especially shades of blonde or light brown, was often admired in medieval Europe. It was associated with youth, softness, and purity. Dark hair was common and accepted, but lighter hair appeared often in poems, songs, and religious paintings. Because natural light hair was not universal, some women used simple methods to change its shade. Herbs, sunlight, and homemade rinses were sometimes used to slowly lighten hair. These were gentle practices done over time without urgency, reflecting how beauty itself was viewed as something slow and natural, rather than dramatic or immediate. Men's hair followed different rules. A well-kept beard could signal maturity and strength, while clean-shaven faces were common among clergy or younger men. Hair that looked controlled, tidy, and modest reflected discipline. Wild or overly styled hair was often linked with vanity or moral weakness. Beauty for men was less about attraction and more about respectability. Looking balanced and orderly mattered more than standing out. Skin color was another quiet marker of beauty and class. Pale skin was admired, not because of fashion alone, but because it suggested a life lived away from hard outdoor labor. Sun-darkened skin meant work in fields, long hours under open skies, and physical strain. Pale skin suggested protection, rest, and higher social position. To maintain this look, women often avoided the sun and used simple coverings. Some even used light powders made from natural materials to soften their complexion. These practices were not meant to transform appearance completely, but to gently guide it toward an ideal already respected by society. Color in clothing and appearance was subtle but meaningful. Bright colors existed, but they were expensive and controlled by laws in many places. Soft tones, natural dyes, and muted shades were common. Beauty was found in harmony rather than contrast. Wearing colors that suited one's place in society was considered proper and attractive. Standing out too much could be seen as prideful or inappropriate. As you imagine these quiet details, notice how medieval beauty was not loud. It did not demand attention. It communicated through suggestion, restraint, and patience. Hair hidden rather than shown. Skin protected rather than displayed. Colors chosen carefully rather than boldly. Beauty existed in what was implied, not what was revealed. As the night grows quieter, let these images soften and drift. You do not need to hold on to them. Allow your breathing to slow. Let your body remain still and supported. In the next part, we will gently move into how aging, health, and life experience shaped beauty over time in the medieval world. For now, remain calm. Let rest continue naturally. In medieval times, the way skin looked carried a deep and quiet meaning, far beyond simple appearance. Imagine living in a world where most people worked outdoors, under the sun, in fields, markets, or on roads. Because of this, pale skin slowly became a symbol of comfort, safety, and higher status. A lighter face suggested that a person did not spend long hours in physical labor. It suggested an indoor life, protected from the sun, filled with calm routines rather than hard work. Beauty, in this sense, was closely tied to the idea of ease and distance from struggle. Women, especially in higher social classes, took great care to protect their skin from darkening. Wide hats, veils, and long sleeves were worn not only for modesty, but to shield the face and hands from sunlight. Staying pale was not about health as we think of it today. It was about signaling a certain place in society. A pale face quietly told a story of privilege, even without words. This made skin color a visible marker of identity, shaping how people were treated and perceived. At the same time, the face itself was expected to look calm and controlled. Strong expressions, deep lines, or signs of strong emotion were often seen as unattractive. A smooth, relaxed face suggested good character, patience, and inner balance. Beauty was linked to calmness rather than excitement. A woman who appeared quiet and gentle was often considered more beautiful than one who showed strong emotion or energy. To achieve this ideal look, people used simple and sometimes risky methods. Natural powders made from plants or minerals were applied to lighten the face. These substances were not always safe, but they were used carefully and slowly day after day. The goal was not dramatic change, but a soft, even tone that matched the beauty ideals of the time. Makeup was subtle, meant to look natural rather than bold. Blush was sometimes added lightly to the cheeks, not to show passion, but to suggest gentle health. Too much color could suggest strong emotions or physical labor, which were not admired in beauty standards. Balance was everything. A face that looked too pale appeared weak. A face with too much color appeared rough. Beauty lived quietly in the middle. As you imagine these medieval faces, think of how beauty was something slow and restrained. It was not meant to stand out loudly. It was meant to blend gently into the expectations of society. The ideal face was soft, pale, calm, and controlled, reflecting not only appearance but behavior and place in the world. As the night grows quiet, let this image rest gently in your mind. In the next part, we will slowly move toward hair, grooming, and how small details shaped beauty in medieval daily life. For now, remain still and let the calm continue. In medieval times, beauty was not something that appeared suddenly or dramatically. It was shaped slowly through daily habits that were quiet, simple, and often repeated without much thought. Imagine a woman waking up early in a small stone house or wooden cottage, with soft morning light coming through a narrow window. There were no mirrors like we know today. At best, there might be a small polished piece of metal or glass, slightly uneven, showing only a rough reflection. Because of this, people were less focused on perfect detail and more focused on overall appearance and cleanliness as a sign of care and discipline. Daily grooming was slow and practical. Hair was brushed carefully, not to style it in many ways, but to keep it smooth and controlled. Loose, wild hair was often seen as careless or improper, especially for married women. Braiding hair was common, not only for beauty but for order. A neat braid showed that a woman had time, patience, and self-control. These qualities were considered beautiful. Oils made from plants or animal fat were sometimes rubbed into hair to keep it from becoming too dry, especially during cold months. The smell of these oils became part of everyday life, gentle and familiar. Skincare was simple but meaningful. Clean skin was admired, but bathing too often was not common. Water had to be carried by hand, and bathing took effort. Instead of frequent baths, people washed their faces and hands daily. Herbs were sometimes soaked in water to create mild cleansers. A clear, pale face suggested that a woman lived a calm life, away from harsh labor under the sun. Pale skin was one of the strongest beauty ideals, not because it was fashionable, but because it showed status and protection. Makeup, as we think of it today, was limited and subtle. Bright colors were often linked to performers or women with questionable reputations. Instead, beauty came from restraint. A little color on the lips or cheeks might be achieved naturally, from the cold air or from gently rubbing the skin. Clean lips, soft hands, and calm eyes were more important than decoration. Beauty was meant to look natural, quiet, and controlled. Clothing also played a role in daily beauty. Dresses were layered, covering most of the body. The way fabric fell, the neatness of seams, and the cleanliness of cloth mattered more than shape. A woman who kept her clothing clean and well-mended was seen as attractive and respectable. Beauty was closely tied to responsibility. Taking care of oneself meant taking care of the household, the family, and social duties. As the day moved on, these small rituals repeated themselves. Adjusting a head covering, smoothing fabric, rebraiding hair if it loosened. Beauty was maintained quietly throughout the day, not shown loudly. There was comfort in these routines. They gave structure to life and helped people feel grounded in a world that could be uncertain and hard. As the night grows quiet, imagine these routines slowing down. Hair loosened slightly, coverings removed, hands washed again before rest. Beauty at night was not about being seen. It was about feeling settled and calm. In the next part, we will gently move into how age, motherhood, and life experience changed beauty standards over time, and how maturity itself became a form of quiet beauty. For now, remain still. Let the calm continue. Let rest settle softly. In medieval times, beauty was not something that stayed only in the mind or in quiet thoughts. It was woven slowly into daily life, into habits that people followed without always questioning them. From the moment a woman woke up, her appearance mattered in small, quiet ways. not in a loud or dramatic sense, but as something constantly observed by family, neighbors, and the wider community. Looking healthy, modest, and proper was important, not only for personal pride, but for reputation. A woman's appearance reflected her family, her upbringing, and her place in society, and this pressure followed her through ordinary tasks like fetching water, preparing food, or walking through the village. Clothing played a large role in shaping how beauty was seen each day. Dresses were layered, covering most of the body, not to hide beauty, but to frame it in a way that was considered respectable. Clean fabric, careful stitching, and simple colors showed care and order, which were deeply connected to beauty. Even when clothes were plain, they were expected to be neat. A woman who appeared unkempt could be judged as careless or morally weak. Beauty, in this sense, was tied closely to discipline and self-control, rather than decoration. Hair was treated with quiet attention. It was washed less often than today, but brushed carefully and kept controlled. Loose hair was usually reserved for private spaces, while public appearances required hair to be tied, braided, or covered. This was not only about modesty, but about signaling maturity and respectability. A woman who followed these customs appeared beautiful because she fit smoothly into what society expected. Beauty was about harmony with social rules, not standing out. The body itself was expected to reflect a balanced life. Extreme thinness was not admired because it suggested illness or hardship. Extreme heaviness was also not ideal because it suggested excess or laziness. A softly rounded body suggested stability, fertility, and access to regular food. This made beauty something practical and grounded, connected to survival and daily work rather than fantasy. A woman's beauty was seen as proof that life around her was functioning well. These standards created quiet pressure. Women learned early to adjust how they moved, stood, and even expressed emotion. Calm behavior, gentle speech, and controlled expressions were seen as beautiful traits. Loudness or strong displays of emotion could damage how a woman was perceived. Beauty became something that lived not only on the face or body, but in posture, tone, and behavior. Over time, these expectations became natural, followed without much thought. As the night grows quieter now, imagine this daily rhythm slowing down. Picture a medieval village settling into evening. Women return home, remove heavy layers of clothing, and let their bodies rest from the quiet effort of meeting these standards all day. Beauty for a moment becomes private again, no longer observed or judged. In the next part, we will move gently into how beauty standards changed with age, marriage, and motherhood, and how a woman's appearance was expected to evolve over time. For now, remain still, let the quiet deepen. Let rest continue in its own slow way. As medieval life moved slowly forward, beauty was not something people expected to last. Aging was accepted early, sometimes even feared, because beauty was closely tied to youth, health, and usefulness. In a world where life was physically demanding, signs of aging appeared quickly. Skin roughened from sun and wind, hands hardened from work, and faces carried lines long before old age truly arrived. There was no real way to hide these changes, and so beauty was seen as something temporary, a phase of life rather than a permanent state. For women especially, aging meant a gradual loss of social attention. Youthful beauty was valued because it suggested fertility, strength, and good health. As these signs faded, Women were expected to shift quietly into different roles, focusing more on family, household duties, and religious devotion. Beauty did not disappear suddenly. It simply stopped being discussed. This silence around aging created a quiet sadness for some. As admiration slowly turned into invisibility, men also felt the weight of time, though in a different way. While strength and physical presence were admired, aging bodies struggled to meet the demands of labor and war. Scars, missing teeth, and worn features were common. These were not hidden, but accepted as part of life. Beauty for men was less about softness and more about endurance. Still, aging meant weakness, and weakness meant loss of respect. This made time itself something to endure rather than enjoy. There were no products to slow aging, no real treatments to restore youth. People relied on simple habits, such as rest, limited sun exposure when possible, and herbal washes believed to keep skin healthy. But most accepted that aging was unavoidable. Beauty faded as naturally as daylight, and there was little comfort offered to those who struggled with this change. As you imagine these medieval faces growing older, notice how quietly this process unfolds. There is no panic, no attempt to fight time, just acceptance, mixed with quiet fear. Beauty was precious because it was brief, and when it passed, life simply moved on without it. As the night grows quiet now, allow this image to soften and fade. Let your breathing slow. Let your body remain still. We will move gently into the final reflections on medieval beauty in the next part. As the medieval world moved slowly through the years, beauty was never frozen in one moment. It changed gently with time, just like the seasons. Unlike today, where youth was often chaste and protected, medieval beauty allowed aging to exist naturally. Wrinkles were not hidden. Lines on the face were not feared. They were seen as signs of experience, endurance, and a life fully lived. Especially for women in rural areas, beauty did not disappear with age. It simply transformed into something quieter and more grounded. Aging faces were familiar and accepted. A woman who had worked in the fields, cared for children, cooked meals, and survived harsh winters carried her beauty in her posture, her calm movements, and her steady presence. There was a softness in maturity that was respected even if it was not praised loudly. Pale skin might fade, hair might thin, but dignity remained important. Beauty was less about catching attention and more about belonging comfortably within one's role in life. Men also aged visibly, and this too was accepted without resistance. A man's beauty did not depend on smooth skin or youthful strength forever. Scars, gray hair, and slower movements told a story of labor and survival. These signs were not always admired, but they were understood. Beauty was not separate from hardship. It was shaped by it. A weathered face reflected a life of effort, and effort was central to medieval identity. There was little effort to preserve youth artificially, no creams to erase lines, no treatments to reverse time. Instead, people adjusted their clothing, their posture, and their behavior as they aged. Older women wore simpler garments, darker colors, and more practical fabrics. This was not done out of shame, but out of rhythm with life. Beauty followed function. What suited the body mattered more than what pleased the eye. As people grew older, beauty became quieter and less visible. It lived in routine, in familiarity, and in the comfort of being known. A woman's beauty could be found in how she moved through her home, how she spoke gently, how she cared for others. These were not qualities displayed for strangers. They were felt by those nearby. Beauty became something shared privately rather than shown publicly. Even in noble circles, aging carried a different meaning than it does today. While youth was admired, older women often gained respect and influence. Their appearance mattered less than their role as advisors, caretakers of tradition, and stabilizing figures within the household. Their beauty was tied to wisdom and calm authority rather than physical traits alone. As you imagine this slow acceptance of time, notice how gentle it feels. There is no rush to stay young, no fear of change. Beauty moves alongside life instead of fighting it. This quiet relationship with aging allowed people to rest within their bodies rather than struggle against them. As the night grows quieter now, let this image soften and fade. Let go of the idea that beauty must be held tightly. In the medieval world, beauty arrived, changed, and slowly settled into something deeper and calmer. Remain still. Let the quiet continue. Let rest deepen naturally. As people in medieval times grew older, beauty slowly became something fragile, something that felt like it could fade without warning. Aging was not hidden or softened the way it is today. There were no creams to slow time, no treatments to change appearance, and no mirrors used constantly to adjust the face. Wrinkles arrived early, shaped by hard work, sun, wind, and stress. Hair changed color quickly, often from poor nutrition or illness. Teeth wore down, skin roughened. The body showed every year that passed, and because beauty was so closely tied to youth, aging carried a quiet fear with it. For women especially, this fear was deeply woven into daily life. Youth was connected to marriage, security, and value. As years passed, many women felt themselves slowly moving out of the center of attention. This was not discussed openly, but it was felt quietly. Younger faces were praised. Softer skin was noticed. Bright eyes were admired. Older women were respected for experience, but rarely described as beautiful. Beauty belonged to a narrow window of time, and once that window closed, it rarely reopened. Men also experienced this shift, though in a different way. While strength and authority could replace youth for men, physical signs of aging still mattered. A strong posture, full beard, and steady presence were admired, but sickness, weakness, or visible decline reduced status. Beauty for men became tied to usefulness and control rather than softness. Aging was accepted, but only if it came with power. Without power, age felt like loss. Because of this, people became very aware of time passing. Each year mattered. Each change in appearance felt important. Beauty was not something taken for granted. It was watched closely, protected where possible, and mourned quietly as it faded. There was little comfort in knowing others aged too. Comparison was constant, especially in small communities where everyone knew each other's faces well. As you imagine this slow passing of time, notice how calm yet heavy it feels. There is no panic, no sudden loss, just a steady understanding that beauty was temporary and closely judged. This made medieval beauty standards deeply emotional, not just visual. They shaped how people felt about themselves, their future, and their place in the world. As the night grows quiet, Allow this image of time and aging to soften and fade. You do not need to hold on to it. Let your body remain still. Let your breathing slow naturally. Allow rest to continue gently, without effort. As medieval life moved slowly forward, beauty standards became less about personal desire and more about control, expectation, and survival. For most people, especially women, beauty was not something chosen freely. It was something learned early and followed quietly. From a young age, girls were taught how they should look, move, and behave in order to be seen as respectable and desirable. These lessons were not spoken loudly. They were shown through daily life, through mothers, sisters, neighbors, and the silent judgment of the community. Beauty became a rule rather than an expression. A woman's appearance was often tied to her family's honor. Cleanliness, modest dress, and controlled behavior reflected not only on her, but on her parents and future husband. This meant beauty was closely watched. Hair had to be kept in certain styles. Skin had to appear pale and untouched by labor. Clothing had to hide the body's shape rather than show it. These expectations were heavy, but they were carried quietly. Complaining was not encouraged. Enduring was. Men also lived under beauty expectations, though they were different. A man was expected to look strong, capable, and healthy, but not soft or decorative. Signs of hard work, such as rough hands or weathered skin, were acceptable and even respected. Too much attention to appearance could be seen as weakness. Because of this, beauty for men was closely tied to usefulness rather than attraction. Looking capable mattered more than looking pleasing. Religion played a powerful role in shaping these ideas. The church often taught that beauty was dangerous when it led to pride or desire. Physical beauty was seen as temporary, something that faded with age, while inner virtue was praised as lasting. At the same time, people still judged one another by appearance every day. This created a quiet conflict. Beauty was discouraged in words, but enforced in practice. People learned to balance this by presenting themselves carefully, never too plain, never too striking. Cosmetics and grooming existed, but they were subtle. Herbal washes, simple powders, and homemade mixtures were used quietly. Nothing was meant to look obvious. The goal was not transformation, but correction, to hide tiredness, to soften harsh features, to appear calm and healthy. Beauty was meant to look natural even when effort was involved. Too much effort suggested vanity, which was frowned upon. As you imagine this world, notice how different it feels from modern ideas of beauty. There is no celebration of individuality, no encouragement to stand out. Beauty was about fitting into a narrow space, staying within invisible lines, and not drawing attention. For many, this made beauty feel less joyful and more exhausting. It was another part of life that required careful control. As the night grows quieter, allow this image to soften. You do not need to hold on to it. Let your body remain still. Let your breathing slow. In the next part, we will gently explore how age, illness, and time affected beauty in the medieval world, and how people learned to accept fading appearance as part of life. For now, remain still. Let the quiet deepen. Let rest continue in its own time. In medieval times, beauty was not something people chased for pleasure or self-expression. It was something they maintained quietly, often as a duty rather than a joy. For women especially, beauty standards were tied closely to discipline, obedience, and control of the body. A beautiful woman was expected to look calm, modest, and restrained, never loud or attention-seeking. Her appearance was meant to reflect her character, and her character was judged through how carefully she followed these unspoken rules. Beauty was not about standing out, but about fitting perfectly into what society expected. Pale skin remained one of the strongest signs of beauty, not because it was naturally admired, but because it showed a life protected from hard labor and the sun. Women avoided sunlight whenever possible, covering their heads, arms, and faces. Some used powders or mixtures made from chalk or crushed minerals to make their skin appear lighter, even if these substances irritated the skin or caused long-term damage. Discomfort was accepted quietly. Enduring it was part of being considered refined. Beauty required patience and silence. Hair, too, was carefully controlled. Long hair was admired, but it was rarely shown. Married women covered their hair almost completely, often tucking it away beneath veils, linen wraps, or structured headpieces. Loose hair was associated with youth, innocence, or sometimes moral looseness. Because of this, beauty was often hidden rather than displayed. A woman could be considered beautiful without ever openly showing the features people admired. Beauty existed more in idea than in display. Facial expressions mattered deeply. A calm, neutral face was preferred over strong emotion. Smiling too freely, laughing loudly, or showing excitement could be seen as improper. Beauty meant stillness. A woman was expected to move gently, speak softly, and avoid drawing attention. Even posture became part of beauty standards. Standing straight, walking slowly, and lowering the eyes were all seen as signs of grace. Men were also shaped by quiet standards, though in different ways. Strength and health were admired, but not excess decoration. Cleanliness, trimmed hair, and a well-kept beard could suggest discipline and reliability. Beauty in men was connected to usefulness and order rather than attraction. A man who looked controlled and stable was considered pleasing, even if he was not striking. Clothing played a powerful role in shaping appearance. Layers of fabric hid the natural shape of the body. Curves were softened, not emphasized. Clothing signaled status far more than physical features did. Rich colors, fine stitching, and clean garments mattered more than facial symmetry. Beauty was read through signs of order, wealth, and respectability. Over time, these standards shaped how people saw themselves. Beauty was not something personal or flexible. It was something measured against rigid expectations. Many lived their entire lives believing their worth depended on how well they fit these narrow ideas. There was little room for individuality. Beauty became quiet, controlled, and deeply tied to social survival. As you imagine this world, notice how heavy these standards feel. Beauty was not playful or freeing. It was something to manage carefully, something to endure. This is what made medieval beauty very different from how we think of it today. As the night grows quiet, let these thoughts soften and fade. You do not need to hold on to them. Let your body remain still. Let your breathing stay slow and gentle. Let rest continue in its own time, without effort. In the medieval world, beauty was often less about how someone looked in a single moment and more about how they carried themselves over time. Life moved slowly, and so did the ideas of attractiveness. A beautiful person was not expected to stand out quickly or dramatically. Instead, beauty revealed itself gradually through patience, calm behavior, and the ability to endure daily life without complaint. This made medieval beauty feel quiet and subtle, shaped by routine rather than display. A person who moved calmly, spoke gently, and accepted hardship with grace was often seen as more attractive than someone who tried too hard to be noticed. Endurance itself was considered a form of beauty. The ability to work long hours, manage a household, care for family members, and continue daily responsibilities without showing frustration or weakness was deeply respected. This was especially true for women, whose beauty was often tied to their role within the home and community. A woman who appeared steady and composed, even during difficult times, was admired not only for her appearance, but for her inner strength. Beauty was something that lasted, not something meant to catch the eye for a moment. Silence also played a role in these standards. In many medieval societies, being quiet and reserved was seen as elegant and proper. Loudness or constant expression was often viewed as unattractive. Beauty was connected to restraint, to knowing when not to speak, and to maintaining a calm presence in shared spaces. This created an idea of beauty that felt gentle and contained, almost blending into the background of everyday life. Clothing supported this idea as well. Garments were layered, modest, and practical, covering most of the body. Rather than revealing shape or movement, clothing suggested dignity and order. The way someone wore their clothes, kept them clean, and repaired them carefully over time mattered more than having many outfits. Beauty was shown through care and attention, not excess. This slow, patient understanding of beauty meant that aging was not always feared in the same way it is today. While youth was appreciated, maturity carried its own form of attractiveness. Lines on the face could suggest experience. A calm expression could signal wisdom. Beauty did not disappear suddenly. It changed shape over time, adapting to life's stages. As you imagine this medieval sense of beauty, notice how quiet it feels. There is no rush, no comparison, no pressure to constantly improve or display oneself. Beauty exists naturally, alongside daily life, shaped by time, habit, and presence rather than perfection. As the night grows quiet, let this gentle idea of beauty settle softly. There is nothing to achieve and nothing to compare. Let rest continue in its own time, gently and without effort. By the time beauty standards had fully settled into medieval life, they were no longer spoken about openly. They lived quietly in glances, in expectations, and in small daily choices. A woman did not wake up thinking about beauty as a goal, but she lived with the understanding that her appearance carried meaning. Pale skin suggested a life away from hard labor. A soft body suggested comfort and fertility. A calm face suggested obedience and modesty. Beauty was not about pleasure or self-expression. It was about fitting smoothly into the world without drawing attention or suspicion. Imagine a medieval woman preparing for the day. There are no mirrors made for clarity, only polished metal or still water. She does not study herself closely. Instead, she adjusts what she can. Hair is covered or carefully arranged. Skin is protected from the sun. Movements are kept gentle. Beauty is created not by decoration, but by restraint. Too much color, too much confidence, or too much individuality could invite judgment. The most admired beauty was the kind that disappeared into normal life, never demanding to be noticed. Men lived under quieter standards, but they existed all the same. Strength mattered, but not excess. A man who looked too refined was questioned. A man who looked too rough was seen as low. Cleanliness, posture, and calm presence shaped how others judged him. Scars could suggest bravery, but too many suggested recklessness. A controlled appearance reflected a controlled life. Beauty, even for men, was about balance rather than attraction. As years passed, these standards shaped how people saw themselves. A woman who aged quickly from childbirth or labor did not feel ugly, but she felt invisible. Beauty belonged to youth, and youth passed fast. Once it faded, attention shifted to duty, motherhood, or faith. Beauty was never meant to last. It was temporary, like good health or good weather. People accepted its disappearance quietly. This acceptance did not mean there was no sadness. It simply meant sadness was not discussed. A woman might remember when her skin was smoother or her hair thicker, but she did not dwell on it. There was no culture of preserving beauty forever. Aging was not fought. It was endured. Wrinkles, scars, and marks of time were signs of survival, not failure. As the night grows quieter now, imagine this world where beauty was never owned, only borrowed for a short time. A world where appearance mattered deeply, yet was never celebrated loudly. Let this understanding soften your thoughts. Let the judgments of faces and bodies fade into the distance. For now, remain still. Let rest continue in its own time, gently without effort. As medieval life moved slowly from one generation to the next, beauty became less about being seen and more about being endured. In a world where survival demanded strength, patience, and restraint, beauty was quietly linked to how well a person could carry hardship without complaint. A beautiful face was one that did not ask for attention. A beautiful presence was one that blended into daily life without disruption. Loud expressions, dramatic movements, or obvious attempts to stand out were often seen as signs of immaturity rather than beauty. Calmness itself became attractive. For women especially, beauty was closely tied to stillness. A woman who moved gently, spoke softly, and took up little space was praised. Her beauty was not something she displayed openly, but something others noticed over time. Grace meant knowing when to remain silent, when to lower the eyes, and when to step back. Even posture mattered. A straight back, slow movements, and controlled gestures suggested discipline and good upbringing. These quiet signals were more important than any physical feature alone. Endurance played a powerful role in how beauty was understood. Pale skin was admired not only because it suggested wealth or indoor life, but also because it showed restraint from physical labor. Yet even among working people, a woman who continued her duties without complaint, despite fatigue or illness, was often described as beautiful in character. Beauty and strength were not opposites in the medieval mind. They existed together in a calm balance. A person who endured quietly was admired deeply. Clothing reinforced this idea of controlled beauty. Layers covered the body, shaping it gently rather than revealing it. Fabric fell loosely, hiding natural lines and curves. This created a sense of mystery and modesty. Beauty was not immediate or obvious. It was discovered slowly, through behavior, consistency, and reputation. The body itself became less important than the way a person carried themselves through daily life. Men, too, were shaped by this idea of restrained beauty. A handsome man was not loud or flashy. He was steady, reliable, and calm. His appearance reflected order rather than excitement. Cleanliness, neat hair, and controlled movement mattered more than physical strength alone. Just like women, men were expected to show discipline in how they looked and behaved. Beauty was linked to self-control. As you imagine this world, notice how different it feels from modern ideas of beauty. There is no rush to impress, no pressure to be noticed quickly. Beauty unfolds slowly, through silence, routine, and patience. It belongs to the long view of life, not to moments of display. As the night grows quiet now, allow this image of medieval beauty to soften and drift away. You do not need to remember details. Let the calm remain. Let rest continue gently, without effort, in its own time. As people in medieval times grew older, beauty slowly changed its meaning. Youth was admired, but aging was not hidden or fought against the way it often is today. Wrinkles, tired eyes, and weathered skin were seen as signs of a life lived through work, family, and survival. Especially in villages and small towns, beauty was not something expected to last forever. It was understood that time would leave marks, and those marks were accepted quietly, without shame or urgency to erase them. For women, aging brought a shift in how beauty was viewed. A young woman was often admired for softness, brightness, and smooth skin, but an older woman gained respect for calm presence, knowledge, and stability. Beauty slowly moved away from appearance and toward behavior. A gentle voice, steady movements, and patience became signs of grace. This kind of beauty did not depend on mirrors or comparison. It existed in how someone moved through daily life, how they cared for others, and how they carried themselves. There were no strong expectations to remain youthful forever. Without constant mirrors, images, or public judgment, people rarely examined their faces closely. Most saw their reflection only in water or small pieces of polished metal. Because of this, changes happened gradually and without obsession. Aging did not arrive suddenly. It unfolded slowly, and people adjusted to it naturally. Beauty faded, changed, and returned in different forms, without struggle. In this way, medieval beauty standards allowed space for acceptance, not because life was easier, but because there were fewer illusions. People knew the body would change, just as seasons changed. This understanding created a quieter relationship with appearance. While youth was admired, it was not the only form of beauty that mattered. Endurance, calmness, and familiarity slowly took its place. As you imagine this slower view of beauty, notice how gentle it feels. There is no pressure to stop time, no rush to correct or hide what naturally appears. Beauty becomes something that moves with life, not something that must be held tightly. This calm acceptance was one of the most peaceful parts of medieval beauty standards, even within a difficult world. As the night grows quieter now, allow this idea to settle softly. Let the thought of gentle, changing beauty drift through your mind without effort. You do not need to hold on to it. Just let it pass, the way time itself always does. Let your body remain still. Let your breathing stay slow. Let rest continue in its own time, gently and without effort. By the time medieval beauty standards had fully settled into daily life, They were no longer just ideas. They had become quiet rules that followed people everywhere, shaping how they moved, spoke, dressed, and even thought about themselves. Beauty was not something admired from a distance. It was something expected, measured, and quietly judged. For many, especially women, there was a constant awareness of how closely they matched the ideal of the time. Pale skin, soft features, modest posture, and controlled expressions were not just preferences. They were signals of worth, discipline, and belonging. Living up to these standards required daily effort. Skin had to be protected from the sun even during long hours of work. Clothing had to be arranged carefully, not too bright, not too plain, not too loose, and not too fitted. Hair had to be covered, braided, or shaped in ways that suggested modesty rather than individuality. Even facial expressions mattered. Smiling too freely or speaking too boldly could be seen as a lack of refinement. Over time, this constant self-control became tiring. The body might rest at night, but the mind remained aware of expectations that never fully disappeared. Beauty standards also carried a quiet emotional weight. When someone matched the ideal, they gained subtle advantages. People listened more closely. Families felt pride. Marriage prospects improved. When someone did not match the ideal, the opposite happened quietly and slowly. Looks became a silent barrier. No one announced it openly, but doors closed gently. Conversations changed tone. Opportunities faded. This made beauty feel less like a gift and more like a requirement for acceptance. Aging made this even harder. Medieval beauty was closely tied to youth. Smooth skin, softness, and a certain fragility were praised. As years passed, maintaining this image became nearly impossible. Lines appeared. Bodies changed. Strength replaced softness. For many, this shift brought a quiet loss of value in the eyes of society. Beauty was not seen as something that evolved. It was something that faded, and with it, attention and respect often faded too. Despite this pressure, most people learned to live within these expectations because there was no alternative. Beauty standards were woven into religion, family life, and daily routine. They were taught gently from childhood and reinforced through example rather than instruction. Over time, people stopped questioning them. They became background noise, always present, always shaping behavior, even when no one was watching. As you imagine living with these quiet rules, notice how exhausting it feels without being dramatic. There is no loud cruelty here, no open punishment, just constant awareness, constant adjustment, constant effort to appear acceptable. This is what medieval beauty standards were really like. Not glamorous, not simple, but quietly demanding, day after day. As the night grows quiet now, allow this image to soften and drift away. You do not need to hold on to it. Let your body remain still. Let your breathing slow naturally. Let rest continue gently, without effort, in its own time. By this point in medieval life, beauty had become something that lived quietly inside the home rather than openly in the streets. As societies grew more controlled by religion and tradition, especially in later medieval centuries, the idea of showing beauty publicly began to fade. Beauty was no longer meant to attract attention. It was meant to show order, modesty, and discipline. A beautiful person was someone who blended into their role smoothly, without standing out too much. This changed how people dressed, moved, and even held their faces. Women were taught from a young age that beauty was not something to display freely. It was something to manage carefully. Clothing covered more skin. Hair was hidden beneath veils, caps, or cloths. Makeup, if used at all, was meant to look invisible. The goal was not to look striking, but to look calm and controlled. A peaceful face, soft eyes, and gentle movements were praised more than bold features. Beauty became quiet, almost private, something noticed only by those close enough to see it. Men, too, were expected to keep their appearance restrained. Flashy clothing or attention-seeking styles could be seen as prideful or improper. A well-kept beard, clean hands, and simple but orderly clothing showed respectability. Beauty for men was tied to steadiness and reliability. A calm posture, measured speech, and controlled expression mattered more than looks alone. The medieval world admired people who appeared balanced, not dramatic. This quiet beauty shaped daily life deeply. People learned to lower their gaze, soften their expressions, and avoid strong emotion in public. Smiling too much, laughing loudly, or drawing attention to the body could be seen as childish or inappropriate. Over time, this created a culture where beauty was linked to silence and restraint. The most beautiful people were often the least noticeable. Inside homes, beauty still existed, but it was subtle. A clean table, neatly folded cloth, brushed hair at the end of the day, and calm presence during evening prayers all carried meaning. Beauty lived in routine, in repetition, in small acts done carefully every day. This made beauty feel steady rather than exciting, comforting rather than impressive. As you imagine this world, notice how different it feels from modern beauty. There is no rush, no comparison, no constant display. Beauty moves slowly, quietly, almost like breathing. It exists whether or not anyone is watching. As the night grows even quieter now, allow this image to soften in your mind. You do not need to hold on to it. Let the idea of quiet beauty drift gently away, just as medieval nights once did. By the time these beauty standards had settled deeply into medieval life, they were no longer seen as trends or choices. They became part of everyday thinking, shaping how people moved, dressed, and even spoke. Beauty was not something separate from life. It was woven into daily behavior. Women adjusted their posture, their expressions, and their routines to match what was expected of them. Men also absorbed these ideas, judging themselves and others quietly, often without realizing where these standards came from. Beauty became a silent rulebook, guiding behavior without ever being written down. For women especially, beauty standards shaped daily habits from morning until night. The way hair was arranged, the way skin was protected from the sun, and the way clothing was worn, all followed the same quiet logic. Beauty was linked to order, control, and modesty. A woman who looked calm, pale, and composed was seen as respectable and trustworthy. This meant emotions were often hidden, movements were careful, and individuality was softened. Over time, this created a life where appearance mattered even more than comfort. These expectations followed women through every stage of life. Young girls learned early how they were supposed to look by watching older women. Mothers passed down habits without explanation. There were no mirrors like today, but people still learned to judge themselves through the reactions of others. A look of approval or disapproval was enough to teach the rules. Beauty became something learned quietly, without discussion, shaping identity from a very young age. Men, too, were influenced in quieter ways. Strength was admired, but not excess. Cleanliness, balance, and restraint mattered. A man who looked too rough could be seen as uncivilized, while one who appeared too delicate might be judged as weak. These narrow expectations shaped how men dressed, groomed, and behaved in public. Beauty standards worked on everyone, even if they were spoken about more openly for women. Over time, living under these expectations created exhaustion. Beauty was not about joy or creativity. It was about fitting in and avoiding judgment. Many people carried a quiet anxiety about their appearance, even if they never spoke about it. The pressure was subtle, constant, and tiring. There was no escape because beauty standards were tied to morality, health, and social value. As you imagine living in this world, notice how heavy it feels without being dramatic. Beauty was not celebrated for personal expression. It was enforced through silence and habit. This is what made medieval beauty standards powerful and difficult. They shaped lives quietly, without cruelty, but also without freedom. As the night grows quieter now, allow this image to soften and drift away. You do not need to hold on to it. Let your body remain still. Let your breathing slow naturally. Let rest continue gently, without effort, in its own time. By the time beauty standards were fully settled into medieval life, they were no longer just ideas or preferences. They became daily expectations that shaped how people lived, moved, and even thought about themselves. Beauty was not something separate from life. It was woven quietly into routines, habits, and social rules. From the moment a person woke up, they were aware of how they looked, how they were seen, and how closely they matched what society considered proper and attractive. This awareness did not come from mirrors alone, but from the reactions of others, from comments made casually, and from the unspoken rules that guided behavior. For women especially, beauty standards were something carried throughout the day. Hair had to be arranged carefully, even during work. Skin had to be kept pale, clean, and calm-looking, even under harsh conditions. Clothing needed to appear modest, balanced, and appropriate for status regardless of comfort. These expectations followed women everywhere, from the home to the marketplace, from church to family gatherings. Beauty was not about standing out loudly. It was about fitting in perfectly, blending into what was considered correct and respectable. Men also lived under quiet pressure, though it looked different. A man's appearance was tied closely to strength, seriousness, and control. Clean grooming, a composed posture, and visible health were important. Looking weak, careless, or overly decorated could damage reputation. A man's body was expected to show readiness for work and responsibility. Beauty, for men, was less about softness and more about steadiness. Even so, the pressure to look right never fully disappeared. These standards shaped posture, movement, and expression. People learned how to walk, how to sit, and how to hold their faces in public. Smiling too much, frowning too deeply, or moving too freely could draw attention. Beauty included calmness and restraint. The ideal person looked balanced and controlled, never rushed or messy. Over time, these habits became automatic, shaping not only appearance but personality as well. The mental weight of these expectations was heavy, even if it was rarely spoken about. Comparing oneself to others happened quietly. People noticed whose skin looked clearer, whose hair sat more neatly, whose clothes appeared more refined. Praise was subtle, but so was judgment. A small flaw could be noticed and remembered. This created constant self-awareness, a gentle tension that never fully left the body. As you imagine this life, notice how beauty was not a moment or an event. It was something lived every hour, every day. It was something carried in the body and mind, shaping behavior and self-worth. This is what made medieval beauty standards so powerful. They were quiet, constant, and deeply embedded in daily life. As the night grows quiet now, allow this image to soften. Let the pressure of those old expectations fade into the distance. You do not need to hold on to them. Let your body remain still. Let your breathing slow naturally. Let rest continue gently, without effort. By the later medieval centuries, beauty was no longer only something that could be seen on the face or body. It had quietly become something that was felt through behavior, posture, and endurance. A person was considered beautiful not because they stood out, but because they blended smoothly into the expectations of their time. Calmness was admired. Loud emotion was discouraged. The ability to remain patient through discomfort was quietly praised. Beauty was tied to how well someone could carry the weight of daily life without complaint. For women especially, beauty was connected to stillness. Moving gently, speaking softly, and keeping the body controlled were seen as signs of grace. A woman who did not rush, who did not laugh too loudly, and who did not show strong emotion was often described as refined. This was not because emotion itself was ugly, but because medieval society valued order over expression. A calm presence suggested discipline, and discipline was considered beautiful. Physical effort was hidden whenever possible. Even though daily life required hard work, the ideal appearance suggested ease. Hands were expected to look soft, even if they were not. Skin was meant to appear smooth, even if it was exposed to cold and sun. Any sign of strain was quietly covered or ignored. Beauty lived in the image of effortlessness, even when effort was constant. Clothing continued to shape these ideas. Layers restricted movement, encouraging slower steps and smaller gestures. Tight bodices and long sleeves forced the body into controlled positions. Over time, the body learned to move within these limits. This limited movement became associated with elegance. Beauty was no longer just about how someone looked standing still, but how they carried themselves through space, slowly and carefully. For men, beauty was increasingly linked to restraint as well. Strength was respected, but controlled strength was admired more. A man who showed patience, composure, and quiet confidence was often considered more attractive than one who showed anger or impulsive behavior. Just like women, men were expected to manage their appearance and behavior in ways that supported social stability rather than personal expression. As you imagine this world, notice how beauty feels heavy rather than exciting. It is not about joy or freedom. It is about fitting into a structure that values calm over expression. This makes medieval beauty feel distant from modern ideas, yet strangely familiar. Even today, society often rewards those who appear composed, controlled, and unbothered, even when life is demanding. As the night grows quieter, allow this image of quiet endurance to soften. You do not need to hold on to it. Let your body remain still. Let your breathing stay slow and natural. Let rest continue gently in its own time without effort. By the later medieval centuries, beauty was no longer only about how a woman looked, but about how quietly she existed within her world. The most admired women were often described not with excitement or passion, but with words like calm, gentle, modest, and still. Beauty had slowly become connected to behavior rather than expression. A woman who spoke softly, moved carefully, and drew little attention was considered more beautiful than one who laughed loudly or showed strong emotion. This idea shaped daily life in subtle ways. Even posture mattered. Standing straight but not proud, lowering the eyes when spoken to, and keeping gestures small were all signs of refinement. Beauty, in this sense, was about taking up as little space as possible. Stillness itself became a form of beauty. A woman sitting quietly, hands folded, eyes lowered, was seen as graceful and pleasing. Movement was meant to be slow and controlled. Quick steps, wide gestures, or energetic behavior were often associated with roughness or lack of discipline. Over time, many women learned to slow their bodies without being told. Their muscles remembered restraint. Their movements softened naturally. This quiet physical control became part of how beauty was judged, passed down not through instruction but through observation and habit. Obedience was also closely tied to beauty standards. A woman who followed rules without complaint, who accepted her role without resistance, was praised not only as virtuous, but as attractive. This did not mean she was happy. It meant she fit the ideal. Beauty became a sign that a woman understood her place in the social order. Questioning authority, showing independence, or expressing personal desire could make someone appear less beautiful in the eyes of society, no matter how they looked. Over time, this created a deep connection between beauty and silence. To be beautiful was often to remain unchallenging and unseen. Marriage reinforced these ideas even further. A bride was admired for her modest dress, lowered gaze, and calm demeanor. The wedding was not a moment to shine, but a moment to demonstrate restraint. Even joy was meant to be quiet. Excessive happiness, laughter, or excitement could be viewed as improper. Beauty was shown through control, not celebration. This shaped how women experienced important moments in their lives, teaching them to contain emotion rather than express it freely. These expectations followed women into later life as well. Aging gracefully did not mean embracing change, but accepting fading beauty without protest. A woman who aged quietly, without bitterness or resistance, was still seen as respectable and pleasing. Complaining about lost youth or wishing to be noticed again was discouraged. Beauty, even in decline, was measured by acceptance and calm. As you imagine this world, notice how heavy these expectations feel, even though they are quiet. Beauty was not something joyful or playful. It was something managed carefully, like a fragile object that could be damaged by the wrong word, the wrong movement, or the wrong feeling shown at the wrong time. This is why medieval beauty standards were not simply about appearance. They were about shaping behavior, emotion, and identity into something small, quiet, and controlled. As the night grows quieter now, let these images soften and drift away. You do not need to hold them. Let your body remain still. Let your breathing slow naturally. Allow rest to continue gently, without effort, as this part of the story comes to a pause. As medieval life moved forward and years passed gently, beauty slowly took on a different meaning. Youth was admired, but aging was expected and accepted in a way that feels unfamiliar today. Lines on the face, changes in the body, and signs of long work were not always hidden or feared. For many people, these changes were seen as natural marks of life lived fully. Beauty did not disappear with age. It simply changed its shape, becoming quieter and less discussed, but still present in everyday life. For women especially, beauty shifted as responsibilities grew. Young women were admired for soft skin, smooth hair, and delicate features, but older women were respected for experience, stability, and knowledge of the household. A woman who managed a home well, raised children, prepared food, and kept order was seen as valuable and admirable, even if her appearance no longer matched youthful ideals. Beauty became tied to usefulness and reliability rather than just looks. Men experienced a similar shift. Strength and physical appearance mattered more in youth, but with age, authority and skill became more important. A man with a weathered face and strong hands could still be seen as impressive, especially if he was known for his craft, honesty, or leadership. Scars, rough skin, and signs of labor were common, and often accepted as part of life rather than flaws to hide. Because mirrors were rare and lighting was poor, people did not study their faces closely every day. This meant aging happened gradually, without constant comparison or anxiety. Changes were noticed slowly, often only when others commented gently or when old clothes no longer fit the same way. This lack of constant self-observation allowed people to live more comfortably in their bodies, even as they changed. Clothing continued to play a role in beauty as people aged. Older individuals often wore more modest, darker, or simpler garments, not necessarily because they were forced to, but because these clothes matched their stage of life. Cleanliness, neatness, and proper dress were still important signs of dignity and beauty, regardless of age. Looking well kept mattered more than looking young. As you imagine these quieter years of medieval life, notice how calm this idea of beauty feels. There is no rush to preserve youth, no constant effort to fight time. Beauty flows gently alongside life, changing as people change, without resistance. This acceptance made growing older less frightening and more natural. As the night grows quieter, let this image soften and fade. Let the idea of gentle change settle comfortably. Allow your body to rest just as it is, without effort, without judgment. Let rest continue in its own time, calm and unhurried. As medieval life slowly moved toward its quieter hours, beauty was no longer something loudly displayed or proudly announced. Instead, it settled into small, everyday details that most people barely spoke about. Beauty lived in routine rather than attention. It was seen in clean hands after a day's work, in hair carefully covered before leaving the home, and in simple clothing kept neat through effort rather than wealth. For most medieval people, beauty was not meant to impress strangers. It was meant to show order, modesty, and balance within daily life. For women especially, beauty was closely tied to discipline. A calm face, lowered eyes, and gentle movements were considered signs of inner beauty. Loud laughter, strong expressions, or confident posture could be seen as unfeminine. Beauty was not about standing out, but about blending smoothly into one's role. The most admired women were often described as quiet, obedient, and modest, rather than striking or bold. This expectation shaped how women carried themselves from a young age, teaching them that beauty was something to control, not celebrate openly. Men experienced beauty standards differently, but they were still shaped by restraint. A well-kept beard, clean clothing, and strong posture mattered, but vanity was frowned upon. Too much attention to appearance could suggest weakness or moral failure. True beauty in men was linked to strength, reliability, and usefulness rather than decoration. Hands rough from work and bodies shaped by labor were often valued more than softness or elegance. Across social classes, beauty was deeply connected to health and survival. Pale skin might be admired among the wealthy, but among workers, strength and endurance mattered more. Teeth, hair, and posture all reflected diet and living conditions. Because medical care was limited, a healthy appearance suggested good fortune, discipline, and sometimes divine favor. Beauty was not separated from life's hardships. It was shaped by them. Religious belief quietly guided these ideas. The body was seen as temporary, while the soul was eternal. Too much focus on physical beauty could be viewed as sinful or distracting. Sermons warned against pride, especially for women. Because of this, beauty was often hidden rather than shown. Covered hair, layered clothing, and simple colors reflected a desire to keep beauty controlled and respectful. As you imagine medieval towns growing quiet at night, think of how beauty existed softly in these lives. There were no mirrors everywhere, no constant comparison, no pressure to be admired by many. Beauty was personal, local, and often unspoken. People judged themselves less by how they looked and more by how well they fit into their role. This quiet approach to beauty made life simpler in some ways, but also restrictive. It allowed rest from constant attention, yet it limited self-expression. Beauty belonged to tradition, not individuality. People carried it gently, without expecting praise. As the night grows deeper now, allow this final image of medieval beauty to soften and fade. You do not need to hold on to it. Let the idea of quiet beauty rest where it belongs, in a slower time. Let your body remain still. Let your breathing stay slow. Let rest continue gently without effort in its own time. As our long and gentle journey comes to its end, it becomes clear that medieval beauty standards were never simple or kind. They were shaped by fear, belief, survival, and social rules, rather than comfort or choice. Beauty was not something people explored for joy or self-expression. It was something measured, watched, and judged quietly by others. For many, especially women, beauty was tied to obedience, health, fertility, and social order. Looking right meant being safe, accepted, and sometimes protected. Looking wrong could bring whispers, judgment, or isolation. In medieval life, beauty was rarely about pleasure. Pale skin showed you did not work under the sun. A slim body showed discipline and restraint. Modest clothing showed virtue and respect. These ideas were passed slowly from one generation to the next, not questioned, only followed. People learned early how they were supposed to look, move, and behave. There was little room to step outside these expectations. Even personal grooming carried meaning, and every small detail could say something about your place in the world. Yet behind these standards were real people living real lives. People who grew tired, sick, aged, and changed. Bodies did not always follow ideals. Faces showed worry and work. Hair thinned, skin darkened, teeth wore down. Medieval beauty standards did not stop time or hardship. They only asked people to hide it as much as possible. This created a quiet tension between reality and expectation, one that many carried silently. As the centuries passed, these ideas slowly shifted. New beliefs emerged. New cultures mixed. Beauty standards softened, changed shape, and moved on. But the medieval world left behind a lesson that still feels familiar. When beauty becomes a rule instead of a feeling, it loses warmth. When it becomes something to earn instead of something to live with, it brings exhaustion instead of peace. As you listen now, imagine setting those old rules down. Imagine stepping away from the narrow mirrors of the past. The medieval world fades gently into the distance, its quiet streets and candle-lit rooms growing softer with each breath. The judgments dissolve, the expectations loosen. What remains is simply the human body at rest, allowed to exist without approval. As the night grows quiet, let this story rest where it belongs. You do not need to remember the details. You do not need to carry the images. Let your breathing stay slow. Let your body remain still. Let rest continue gently, without effort, in its own time. Good night. Sleep well.